Welcome to the Weekly Takeaway, what you need to know from the news. Glad to have you with me today. My name is Jeremy Stolniker and excited to spend a few minutes with you. I am on a trip. I'm out of our normal studio. You might notice the background's a little bit different, sitting in a conference room in the city of San Antonio. I'm on a trip with my wife and my son, and we're doing some sightseeing and some other things while we're here. But I wanted to stop and give you some news of the week and hopefully give you some takeaways. It is so important. I say this a lot, but it's so important that as we consume the news, we get beneath the headlines and do our best to ask the question, how does this apply to me? How does this impact me? We are in a news cycle right now. I'm going to talk about some of these stories. There's just a couple that I'll cover today. But we're in a news cycle right now that is absolutely hysterical. We have on one hand the news of the political as the Democratic nominating process is taking place. We're making our way toward a general election in November. That's happening on one side. We've got the coronavirus and all that's going on along with that on the other side, which means that our media is absolutely out of control. It's hysterical. And it's so important for us in the midst of an environment like this one to step back and try to get a clear head, maybe some new perspective, and ask the question, what's my takeaway from all of this? There's one story, and I'll jump into the first one today, that I've been trying to avoid as much as possible, but you just can't avoid it. It is everywhere, and that is the story of the coronavirus. This has been something that, again, you've been living with, I've been living with, we've all been living with, but it seems to have come to a place this week where a lot of decisions have been made, at least nationally here in the United States, about how we're going to deal with those things. The World Health Organization has finally called this a global pandemic. And we think of pandemic, we think of like zombies and the apocalypse and bad things happening. That's a crazy, scary word. Really what that means is that there's a health crisis or a health scare that's moved beyond just one continent, and it has become something global. It continues to grow, and they've named it as a pandemic. They've done that for a specific reason, just as many states and localities have declared a health emergency. Declaring this a global pandemic releases funds and allows them to take other measures than they would otherwise. So it's not as scary as it sounds, but it's a big deal, and there's a lot happening, and people are getting sick and being diagnosed with this. Our president this week finally sat down in the Oval Office and spoke to the country for a couple of minutes and laid out his plan for dealing with this. This has been an interesting thing to see unfold. I'll tell you what he said, but as I watched this and then saw the pundits on both sides of it, it's insane. The president was criticized last week for not doing enough, and he's not doing enough. He's incompetent. He's not trying. The country is going to implode because of what he's not doing. He then comes out with several measures to deal with this, and the same people who are saying he's not doing enough are saying, whoa, what is he doing? He's crazy. He hates immigrants, and he hates people who are sick, and he hates the elderly, and he's going to cause our country to implode because of what he's doing. Man alive, one of the big takeaways for me watching all this unfold is leadership is often an extremely thankless and very criticized endeavor. If you're going to lead, you have to lead with the best information that you have to the best of your ability to accomplish things that you really believe are the right things. And just go forward. If you're doing it because people are in agreement with you, you probably won't do much because there will always be a lot of people who are against you, whether you act or don't act, lead or don't lead, take strong measures or take no measures. Someone's going to be upset at you, and that's one of the lessons from this week. All right, but what did the president say? Well, he did a couple of things in his talk. First of all, he reflected on the fact that earlier this week and at the end of last week even, he worked with Congress to release a few $billion in funds and emergency funds to deal with this epidemic. And that will be used in a lot of different ways. One is research, trying to bring about an end to this, of course, and studying it and a lot of ways that the money is needed. One of the things he says he wanted to do with that money is make funds available for employees across the country, particularly those hourly employees who will really lose much of their livelihood if they have to take time off, if they have to go into self-quarantine, or if their companies shut down, as many have kind of put a pause on operations. So some of that money has been released to help those who are struggling financially or will struggle economically because of this. He banned travel from Europe. Europe seems to be the epicenter right now. The focus of this virus. It's really changed from China. They're starting to recover to now Europe, and so the president banned travel from European countries other than Great Britain, interestingly enough. And again, folks are trying to figure out, well, what does that mean for trade and all of these things? And he's tried to clarify some of that. But that was one of the measures that was taken, just adjusting travel, and a couple of other things that he has tried to release and help the country just deal with this ever-changing, ever-evolving problem. And this is new for all of us. It's also new for the president and his administration. So they're trying to figure their way through this and find their way through it, and they're doing that. Other responses outside of what the president is doing by executive order and working with politicians, we've seen some other folks respond. The NBA responded this week by suspending all future basketball games. Now, this comes at a time in the season where they're getting close to the playoffs, and the games have been suspended at a critical time for some of these teams, but the NBA said this is bigger than our teams, bigger than our players, bigger than the business. We need to figure out what's going on here. We know that a couple of NBA players were diagnosed with having contracted this virus, and so they're trying to figure that out. Other large sporting events doing the same thing. NCAA national tournament is March, so it's happening, March Madness, and they're trying to figure out, do they want to play these games without spectators in the stands, or do they want to postpone these games? Now, the impact on these players, it's different than it is for NBA players. These are college basketball players who really try to use this tournament as a showcase for their skills so they can go on to the next place in their career. So we'll see what happens there. A lot of folks trying to figure this out. In California, the governor of California, Governor Newsom, in our state, declared that until the end of March, a couple of weeks from now, there should be no gatherings in the state larger than 250 people. Again, trying to contain the spread of this virus, but that has a real impact on gatherings, on meetings, on conferences, on churches. The month that Easter will take place, how will churches deal with this? We don't know. Humans are pretty innovative. I think we'll figure it out, but this has an impact, of course, across the board. A lot of events are being canceled and changed. Parades, races, all of it being impacted by this. And we look at everything that's happening, and it seems pretty insane to us. And if you're like me, you don't know exactly how to take it all. You step back, you try to figure it out, and it's just not easy to figure out. So many takeaways, so many. We need to be prepared for things like this. We need to get our families in a position financially and physically where if there is a global epidemic or a global event of some kind, we can survive and we can take care of ourselves for a while. This is a big takeaway, right? And this is something maybe in hindsight we can look back to. Things are often overblown. We don't know if this is one of those things, but it may very well be. There is no appreciation for those who are trying to deal with it. There's so many pundits, so many opinions, so many people that believe they know how it should be dealt with. No one seems to be doing the right thing. Okay, a lot of takeaways. Probably the biggest takeaway for me right now in all of this, watching the hysteria and the panic going on, is that we need to refuse to be scared. Refuse to be scared. There are so many scared people right now. And I get it. The media really makes their money by scaring us, by doing their best to cause us to get worked up into a frenzy, to be scared at everything that's going on, to believe that the world is coming to an end. This is what the media gets paid to do. This is how they operate. This is their agenda. But the takeaway for me, again, I say this over and over and over again, is we have to get beneath the headlines, figure out to the best of our ability what's actually going on. And we don't necessarily always know what's going on. But we need to also understand that fear and panic are never the right answer. We can live afraid, we can panic, we can find ourselves overwhelmed with the anxiety of what might happen, or we can evaluate the information that we have, take the best steps that we can, and begin to move forward. That's the very best that we can. Refuse to be scared. Refuse to be afraid. It's going to be okay. We don't know how this thing's going to end or how it's going to unfold, but certainly it will. In China, where it all started, each day they're seeing fewer and fewer cases of this virus reported. Many of their public gatherings that they had once canceled are being rescheduled. It's starting to work its way through there. Europe will be the same. The United States will be the same. It may get worse, at least on paper, before it gets better. We don't know. But panic is not the answer. Do the best you can, take care of yourself, and move on. And we'll all get through this together. We'll get to probably 2 or 3 months from now, maybe early summer, and we'll look back and be able to take a clear view of what happened and make some decisions going forward. Don't let this lesson be lost. Learn for the future, but refuse to live in fear. Other things are going on in the news, and it's important for us to realize that, because if you turn on the TV at all, even sports used to be our sanctuary from all the regular news. The sports news right now is all about this because of what's happening in the NBA and other places. It's important to realize, to recognize, to understand that around the world there are other things going on. This week, and this happens regularly, and I try to bring it up every time it does. This week in Iraq, we had some service members killed. 2 Marines were killed in operations in Iraq. In the mountains of Iraq, trying to find some of these fighters and try to get rid of some of these militia members. And we're told that these militias are supported by Iran. We don't know exactly, but these Marines, for working with MARSOC, Marine Special Operations Command, were killed. Their names: Captain Moses Navas, and Gunnery Sergeant Diego Pongo. These men had served for a very long time. You can look them up and understand the training that they had and what they were doing. But they lost their lives in Iraq, going after bad guys who would seek to do us as a nation, certainly our ideals and our philosophy as a country, to do us harm. And we need to, again, be reminded that there are men and women around the world right now standing in the gap, fighting for the freedoms that we enjoy, fighting for the cause of democracy. And these things are happening even while we're worried about whether or not we have enough toilet paper. Also this week, in addition to those 2 Marines that I just mentioned, we know that 2 more American service members were killed in a rocket attack. We don't have their names yet, but they were killed in a rocket attack. This is happening around the world. There are folks who are really doing the hard work of keeping us safe so that we can worry about other things. and they're doing it. Life does not stop. And just because of what the news is telling us is really important for us to focus on. And I hope that you remember that. I'm sure that you do. A lot of bad news in the news, but there are other things going on. And I wanted to talk to you about this for just a second. This was an experience that I had just 2 days ago here in San Antonio. I told you I'm in San Antonio. And an experience that I had 2 days ago in San Antonio that, I don't know, it made me proud, I guess. It encouraged me. And it reminded me that there's a lot of good going on, even though there seems to be so much bad. Stories dominating the news. And what you don't often hear about are things like this. Went to a San Antonio Spurs game. My son, we're on a trip for his high school graduation. He's in college now. We've taken about a year to get to the place where we could have this this time. But we're in San Antonio, and he wanted to watch a basketball game. He likes the Dallas Mavericks, actually. So if you're a Mavericks fan, you're for him. If you're not, you're against him. Regardless, they were both playing here in San Antonio. So the Mavericks are playing the Spurs. Turns out it was one of the last NBA games that we played until the suspension is over. But we've been trying to arrange our schedule. We finally got tickets. We got there. And it just so happened to be Military Appreciation Night. San Antonio Spurs and USAA, National Savings Bank, which services the military community, put on a Military Appreciation Night. We didn't know it was Military Appreciation Night, but it was. And what an incredible event. Again, talking about the service members around the world who are doing these things for us, and some are giving their lives to defend the freedoms that we enjoy. Sitting in this arena of several thousand folks, and it was an amazing thing. The game was cool, but every time there was a break in the game, honor was paid to someone in the military or the military in general. Started off with the Star Spangled Banner, of course, and military service members holding a flag unfurled, and videos of what the United States military is doing around the world, folks standing to their feet, applauding. It was amazing. During one of the breaks, they brought out a World War II survivor, Pearl Harbor survivor, World War II veteran, Pearl Harbor survivor, and told his story. And again, no one said stand up and applaud, but as the story was being told and he was pushed in a wheelchair out to the center court, folks around the arena stood up and applauded and continued to applaud. And every time another part of his story was told, folks applauded again. What an amazing thing really to be a part of. We get so caught up in the politics and the partisanship and the scares and the pandemics that we forget about folks who are doing real work. They honored other folks. We were all able to participate at halftime in the swearing in of young men and women who are going into the military. That was a neat thing to be a part of, again, in that venue, in that environment. They honored a family of a service member, a United States Army soldier who was injured in Iraq and is dealing with the injuries. Medically retired from the military. the San Antonio Spurs, USAA, the bank. They honored him. They honored his family. They gave them a van that was equipped to handle everything that they need to do as a family. And they were crying. Again, spontaneous applause, people standing to their feet, standing ovation. It was just an amazing thing to be a part of. And so many other things took place that night. Man, it was great. And again, we're reminded that even in the midst of a sporting event, in an environment that's overwhelmed by fear, we as communities need to do the best we can to honor those who are serving, not just service members. I talk about that a lot. That's my background, and that's where I live. But folks who are serving, men and women who are doing things that make the world a better place. We think of those who are serving in our communities and those who are serving in our states and in our country and around the world, folks who are really paying it forward in a big way. We need to do our very best to honor those folks. And when we do, I think we are the very best that America has to offer. We're the best of us when we do that work. What a great privilege to be a part of this country. And I know it's not perfect. I know that we have our issues, and whether you love our president or hate our president, whether you're left, right, or center, regardless of where you fall on that spectrum, you've got a very specific opinion about how things should be run. Maybe you're not as concerned about that as you are your own life, trying to figure out how you're going to make money, how you're going to take care of your family, how you're going to do the things that you need to do. We've all got stuff going on, and there is no perfect place in the world, but we live in a great country, and I'm thankful for it. And I'm thankful we have the opportunity from time to time to step back and really look at those things that are important. And remember, there are men and women around the world doing their best to provide the things we need to continue to live the life that we're so blessed to live. The virus, it's still growing and going, grabbing people. We'll see how it all turns out. I don't know, but we'll get to the other side. Don't be afraid. Refuse to live in fear. Don't forget there are other stories taking place, a lot of them, a lot of stuff's happening around the world. But be encouraged to know that as communities, we can still focus on the positive and rejoice in the fact, give honor to those who are serving others bigger than themselves and in spite of what's going on around the world. Those are your weekly takeaways. Again, so much news, but the big dominating story is the one that's in our face all the time. And I hope that in the next couple of weeks, we'll be able to talk about some other things and see some other things and understand some other things. But I hope that you will decide to just have a great week and a great weekend, that your takeaway will be that in spite of what's happening, you're going to decide to move forward in a meaningful and positive way. Thank you for watching. If you have not yet, please hit the like button on YouTube, subscribe, go ahead and hit the notification bell so you know when new content comes online. Comment if you will, share this content out, and we look forward to meeting with you again next week about the same time. Thank you. I'll talk to you soon.